These aren't the stories your mother told you. No, these are the other stories.
Today's episode of The Other Stories is Brampton Woods, written by Matt MacBride and narrated by Josh Curran.
I blame the Patels for landing me in this fix. If they'd made it harder to nick stuff from their corner shop, I wouldn't have gone in there in the first place and seen the advert in their window. Trainee Private Investigator Wanted, it said. Flexible hours, no experience necessary, driving license, and some knowledge of digital photography required. So, it's all because I fancied a Snickers that afternoon that I'm sitting in a farmhouse-style kitchen straight out of House and Home magazine, waiting for Grimshaw to come back and kill me. I'm not sure how he's going to do it, but judging by the amount of plastic sheeting, it's going to be messy. He said he'd be back in a few minutes. Needed to get another roll of gaffer tape from the garage, he said. He's already used up one roll taping me to this chair. In the meantime, apart from admiring the shaker-style units in his designer kitchen, I've been mulling over the events that brought me here, and, more significantly, why he's going to kill me. Just because I saw him run over a dog. I can't ask him. He's wrapped a yard of tape around my chops. I was a stranger to steady employment before Rockford Surveillance took me on. The owner wasn't fussy. He said I had a forgettable face and was completely unremarkable. Ideal qualities for the job. His office was 2 rooms above the Patel shop, and I think he filched the name from some old TV detective show. I spent the next few months following cheating husbands and wayward wives, sitting in a clapped-out Honda Civic with a camera at the ready. I was paid a per diem pittance, and the assignments were boring. But I soon found a way to supplement my meagre income. Most of Rockford's clientele were wealthy, middle-class professionals living in the upmarket suburbs of the city. BMWs, Jaguars, and detached mock Tudor houses were the norm. They provided a rich source of improprieties. The first time I decided to do a bit of freelancing was more out of sympathy than avarice. I'd been keeping an eye on a bloke whose wife reckoned was having an affair. He had all the appearances of a model husband, but she was right. I clocked him coming out of a hotel one afternoon with a stunning brunette. Just to make sure it wasn't a one-off, I decided to keep up the surveillance for another few days. One morning, his wife followed him out of the house, 180 pounds of shapeless dressing gown capped with dirty blonde hair, yelling her head off while managing to keep a cigarette stuck to her lower lip. He got into his car without a word, as she stood there, glowering, hands on broad hips, shouting at him like an overweight drill sergeant. I decided he deserved an out. As soon as he parked up, I pulled into the adjoining slot. I spilled the beans and offered to let him delete the photos from my camera, if he gave me $1,000 in cash. I would tell my boss that there was no evidence of an affair. We did the deal as soon as the banks opened, and he was as grateful for his good fortune as I was for my small one. After that, I quickly learned that a heck of a lot of well-to-do people wore a mask of respectability to hide their true character. I also discovered they were willing to pay to keep those masks from slipping. I always chose my targets carefully. Individuals with a reputation to uphold, people in positions of responsibility, outwardly upright citizens who would be horrified if their indiscretions were revealed. It's surprising what you find out when you observe someone closely for a few days. I uncovered all manner of peccadillos from the manager of a lower division football club who was placing bets against his own team, to a solicitor who was upskirting women on escalators. I never demanded extortionate sums of money, enough to make it worth my time and effort, but easily affordable for my clients. $5,000 was the most I ever asked for. Avoiding embarrassment is a powerful motivation to pay off a blackmailer. Grimshaw was different from my usual clients, in that I came across him by accident. I'd been shadowing a trophy wife whose old man had become suspicious. She was dead easy to tail, driving her flashy red sports car or tottering around town on killer heels. On that particular evening, September 4th, I'd followed her car to Brampton Woods, a local nature reserve. It definitely looked fishy to me, so I switched my dashcam on and filmed her as she bumped along a rough dirt road to a parking area. She pulled up alongside the only other vehicle, a late model Mercedes G-Wagon. I slotted the Honda between two overhanging trees at the side of the track and started snapping away. She climbed into the murk, and the two of them were soon at it. I could see the G-Wagon rocking on its suspension and the windows misting up. When the light began to fade, I decided to leave them to it, and reversed until I found a place wide enough to do a three-pointer. It was on the way back down the track that I encountered Grimshaw. His silver Range Rover shot out of a firebreak right in front of me. He seemed to be in a hurry, but once clear of the woodland, he slowed down a bit, and I caught up with him as we both headed back towards the city. We reached the suburbs, and that's when he hit the dog. I can't say it was his fault. The stupid mutt ran out into the road. However, Grimshaw didn't even slow down. It was like he didn't know he'd run the thing over, or didn't care. The dog looked extremely dead, so I didn't stop either. But I knew that you had to inform the council if you ran over an animal, and I guessed that wasn't going to happen. I checked my dashcam. It was still recording. Sensing an opportunity, I followed his Range Rover to its destination, a standard issue detached mock Tudor on a pleasant tree-lined avenue. Early the next morning, I went back and got my first good look at Grimshaw. Middle-aged, wiry, clean-shaven with thinning hair, expensive suit and briefcase. I followed him to a modern dental surgery where I found his name on the plaque next to the door. I confirmed it with the receptionist when I went inside to make inquiries about the price of fillings. He was the ideal mark. Wealthy, with an image to protect, I was sure he had plenty of dog lovers on his patient list. After a few days' contemplation, I decided a letter would be the best method of initial contact. I penned a note to avoid leaving any clues on my laptop if anything went wrong. Dear Mr. Grimshaw, I followed you home from Brampton Woods on September 4th. I know what you did, and have it recorded on video. The evidence is for sale for £2,000. If you want it, send an SMS. I included the number for one of my cheap burner phones, wrote his name on an envelope marked confidential, and shoved the letter under his surgery door. A day later, the phone pinged and I read his text message. Bring all copies of evidence to 14 Cavendish Avenue at 6 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Cash waiting. He was inviting me to his home address, which must mean he was either single, or if he had a wife and kids, they'd be out. Have you got everything with you? He asked me on the doorstep. Does anyone else know about this? I told him yes and no, and as he stepped aside to let me enter, I felt a sharp prick on the side of my neck. I would have thought it was an insect bite if I hadn't glimpsed the movement of his arm. The effect was instantaneous and amazing. Within seconds I felt woozy, my knees buckled, and I collapsed like a cheap tent. Grimshaw had to hold me up and half drag me into his kitchen. I was euphoric, enjoying the best trip ever as he sat me down and began gaffer-taping me to a chair. I was too happy to object. Midazolam, injected straight into the jugular, he offered by way of explanation as he strapped my wrists to the wooden chair arms. Wears off after about half an hour. I use it as a pre-med when I do major reconstructive work. Nice, isn't it? What? I managed, unable to form any coherent words. "Sorry about this, but I can't risk you disturbing the neighbours," my captor said, as he used more of the tape to gag me. Grimshaw emptied my pockets and placed everything on the grey soapstone countertop. He rifled through my wallet and found my Rockford business card. "So, Snoop, eh? I suppose my wife hired you to keep an eye on me. Well, whatever you've found out isn't going to do either of you much good now, is it?" The effect of the midazolam was wearing off, but what he was saying still didn't make much sense. He picked up the SD card I'd removed from my dashcam to fulfill my part of the bargain. "I assume this is your video evidence, yes?" I nodded enthusiastically and mumbled agreement through the tape, hoping he'd be satisfied and let me go. "Well, I would better get rid of this straight away." He lit one of the gas rings on the 6-burner range and, holding the tiny plastic card with a pair of stainless steel tongs, incinerated it. After he'd flushed the ash down the sink, he blew out the pilot lights for the burners, then dragged me closer to the range before spreading plastic sheeting around and between the legs of my chair, all the time keeping up a nervous chatter. "I don't want a repeat of last week. My wife made a terrible mess. She let go, if you get my drift. I hope you don't do the same. I can't have your DNA spread all over the floor." "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. "You only ran over a dog? What's it got to do with your wife? I'm only asking for a couple of grand to save you any embarrassment." Unfortunately, it came out as... "I could finish you off with midazolam," Grimshaw said, ignoring my pathetic grunts. "Which would be more pleasant, even enjoyable, but if your body is ever discovered and traces found, it would throw suspicion on me, being a dentist. The tiny amount I gave you will be undetectable after a few hours." I felt sweat break out on my forehead as I realised he really did intend to murder me. And that's when he went off to get more gaffer tape. Grimshaw has just returned and is prattling incessantly as he's taping a huge polythene bag around the range, carefully sealing all the gaps. It's obvious to me now that he's going to seal me inside and then turn on the gas. Not quite as messy as I feared, but just as terminal. He tells me that he used the same modus operandi to dispatch his wife on September 4th. He buried her body in Brampton Woods that same evening. He can't understand how I know about it. He thought he'd been exceptionally careful. Not being the sharpest arrow in the quiver, it finally dawns on me that Grimshaw thinks that's why I'm blackmailing him. It's all a terrible mistake. I plead, meaning, "I only know about the dog. I had no idea you'd murdered your wife." Grimshaw takes no notice whatsoever. "So that's the reason he's going to kill me. And I have no way of putting his mind at rest. Even if I could, it wouldn't matter because now I do know. We bought new mattresses just last month," Grimshaw says cheerily as he drapes the bag over me and starts to tape it down. "Luckily, I kept all the packaging. It's been really handy, and it's rather appropriate, don't you think?" My eyes fill with tears when I realise the brand name, Heavenly Sleep, is emblazoned multiple times across the polythene. He twists the knobs for the gas rings before quickly sealing the last few inches. I hold my breath and rock my body violently, trying to overturn the heavy wooden chair. I'm forced to inhale, and I choke on the stench of rotten eggs. I can see Grimshaw smugly watching me die as my consciousness ebbs away, and I'm left with the bitter certainty that he'll go on hiding behind his mask of respectability long after I'm lying in an unmarked grave, somewhere in Brampton Woods.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Other Stories. Brampton Woods was written by Matt MacBride, narrated by Josh Curran, produced by Duncan Muggleton, with music by Duncan Muggleton and Tom Robson, and sound effects provided by freesound.org. The episode illustration was provided by Luke Spooner of Carry On House. A quick thanks to our community managers Joshua Boucher and Jasmine Arch, and to Joshua Boucher for helping with our submission reading, and of course to Ben Errington, the masked maestro of digital Discord. Josh Curran is a narrator and writer. He's narrated many episodes of the other stories over the show's lifetime. He's also the creator of the horror audio drama podcast Miscreation. You can follow him on Twitter at @JCurranWriter. The Other Stories is a production of the Story Studio Hawk and Cleaver, and is brought to you with a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. That means don't change it, don't sell it, but by all means share the hell out of it. So, until next time.